In the calm hours after sunset, when the warm light from the hearth fire created long shadows on the wooden beams of a Norse longhouse, the Viking people prepared for what modern science now sees as possibly the most restorative sleep in human history. While we in the 21st century battle insomnia, sleep disorders, and the persistent glow of electronic devices, the Norse in Scandinavia during the Viking Age from 793 to 1066 CE had a relationship with sleep that was significantly different, and arguably better, than ours. The idea that a culture known for raiding and warfare could enjoy exceptional sleep quality may seem surprising. However, the evidence indicates that the environmental conditions, cultural practices, and lifestyle choices of Viking Age Scandinavia formed a perfect combination for deep sleep. From their daily rhythms to their sleeping environments, and from their eating habits to their views on rest, the Norse people practiced sleep habits that modern sleep scientists now recommend to patients struggling with sleep deprivation. Archaeological findings from sites in Scandinavia, Iceland, and Norse settlements in the British Isles, along with literary evidence from sagas, show a culture whose sleep patterns were closely connected to natural cycles. Unlike our current focus on getting 8 consecutive hours of sleep, which is a recent development in history, the Vikings had sleep patterns that worked in sync with their environment, bodies, and cultural needs. This article looks at the various reasons why Viking sleep practices may have been the most effective in history. We will explore how their biphasic sleep patterns matched natural human rhythms, how their physical environments supported better sleep, and how their cultural attitudes toward rest led to healthier sleep habits than many later civilizations achieved. By understanding the sleep practices of the Norse, we gain not only historical insight but also potentially useful lessons for improving our own strained relationship with sleep today. As we examine the sleeping habits of the Viking Age, we will meet figures like Thorvald the shipbuilder. His winter sleep routine at his coastal Norwegian homestead reveals much about Norse sleeping environments. We will also consider Astrid the healer, who inherited knowledge of sleep-inducing herbs over generations. These historical examples shed light on the experience of sleep during this fascinating time in human history. The evidence points to a thought-provoking conclusion. Despite their image as fierce warriors and explorers, the people of the Viking Age may have been some of the best-rested humans ever. This quality may have contributed to their exceptional achievements in navigation, craftsmanship, and cultural growth. When it comes to sleep, we modern humans can learn a great deal from our Norse ancestors. The modern fixation on consolidated 8-hour sleep is a historical anomaly, stemming from industrialization, artificial lighting, and strict work schedules rather than human biology. Archaeological evidence and saga accounts suggest that the Vikings, like many pre-industrial societies, practiced what sleep historians call biphasic or segmented sleep. This pattern may align more closely with our natural biological rhythms. The Old Norse language gives hints about this sleep pattern. The sagas often refer to firfin, or first sleep, and mention waking in the middle of the night for various activities before returning to odfin, or second sleep. While these terms don't provide enough evidence on their own, they fit with what we know about sleep patterns in pre-industrial Europe. For example, in the Grettir saga, the hero Grettir Sandarson is described as rising after his first sleep to take care of household tasks before going back to bed later. Similarly, in a Gil saga, characters wake up in the middle of the night to conduct business or talk before going back to sleep until dawn. Excavations at Viking settlements provide support for this textual evidence. For instance, digging at Jorvik, the current York in England, a major Viking settlement, revealed household designs that encouraged nighttime activities. Fire pits in longhouses showed signs of being tended throughout the night, indicating regular waking periods. Based on this evidence and our understanding of pre-industrial sleep patterns, a typical Viking sleep schedule might have looked like this. After sunset, especially during the long winter nights in Scandinavia, households gathered around the central hearth. Once complete darkness fell, usually a few hours after sunset, they would go to bed for their first sleep, which might last about 4 hours. After that, many would wake naturally. This midnight waking period, lasting around 1 to 2 hours, was not seen as insomnia or a sleep disorder like we classify it today. It was a normal part of the night. During this time, Vikings might tend to the fire, check on livestock, engage in quiet conversation, perform religious rituals, or even visit neighbors. For instance, consider Bjorn Haraldsson, a farmer from the Trondheim region of Norway. Archaeological Evidence suggests that after his evening meal, and perhaps some storytelling around the fire, Bjorn would retire to his sleeping platform as darkness fell, usually around 7 or 8 o'clock p.m. In winter, after sleeping deeply for about 4 hours, he might wake around midnight. He would add wood to the central hearth, check on his valuable livestock, perhaps drink some ale or water, and possibly discuss the next day's work with family members who were still awake. After about an hour of these activities, he would return to his sleeping platform for a second sleep until dawn, the biological basis for biphasic sleep. Modern sleep science has begun to show that biphasic sleep may actually be more natural for humans than our current pattern of consolidated sleep. Research by historian A. Roger Eckerk, who documented hundreds of historical references to segmented sleep in pre-industrial Europe, suggests that this pattern was normal throughout human history until artificial lighting changed how we relate to darkness. The human body naturally produces a surge of prolactin during the midnight waking period of biphasic sleep, a hormone linked to a sense of calm and well-being. Additionally, the natural circadian rhythm tends to have a period of heightened alertness a few hours after falling asleep, which aligns perfectly with the biphasic pattern. For Vikings living in northern latitudes, biphasic sleep would have been especially useful during winter, when darkness could last 16 to 20 hours in parts of Scandinavia. Trying to sleep continuously for such long periods would have been impractical. The midnight waking period broke up the long dark hours into manageable segments while allowing for necessary tasks to be completed. Seasonal variations in Viking sleep. The significant seasonal differences in daylight at northern latitudes would have created notable variations in Viking sleep patterns. During summer, when daylight could last over 20 hours in parts of Scandinavia, sleep would be compressed into shorter periods. The sagas sometimes mention the difficulty of sleeping during the nightless nights of midsummer. The Havamal, a collection of Old Norse poems from the Poetic Edda, contains wisdom about moderation and sleep. It suggests that an unwise person stays awake all night worrying. When morning comes, they are tired, and their troubles remain unchanged. This shows an understanding that sleep needed to be managed according to seasonal changes and personal needs. In winter, the pattern would shift dramatically with darkness dominating the day. Sleep would expand, though it likely remained in a biphasic pattern. Archaeological evidence from winter dwellings shows they were designed to maximize warmth and minimize fuel use during these long nights, creating ideal conditions for extended periods of rest. The midnight activities. The midnight waking period in Viking households was a time of quiet productivity and social connection. The sagas mention various activities carried out during this time, such as craft work, making and repairing tools, spinning, and other quiet handcrafts suited the midnight hours by firelight. Archaeological evidence from Viking settlements shows numerous small craft items that could have been produced during these quiet moments. Some scholars believe that certain religious rituals may have been performed during the midnight hours. The liminal nature of this period, between one day and the next, held spiritual significance in many pre-Christian traditions. Storytelling and passing knowledge may also have occurred during these quiet hours when the mind was open and reflective, and the household was gathered closely together. The privacy provided by darkness made this a natural time for intimacy between couples. In more turbulent times, the midnight waking period allowed for checking defenses and changing guards, ensuring continuous protection. Take the example of Gudrun, a weaver from a settlement near modern-day Roskilde in Denmark. Archaeological evidence from similar households suggests that during her midnight waking period, she might use the quiet hours to spin thread by the light of the hearth fire. This task required focus but not bright light. This productive use of what would otherwise be wasted time in bed allowed her to maximize both her rest and her output. The transition to consolidated sleep. The biphasic sleep pattern of the Vikings began to fade across Europe in the centuries following the Viking Age, especially with the spread of artificial lighting and the regulation of time that came with industrialization. By forcing sleep into a single consolidated block, modern humans may have disconnected from a more natural rhythm that served our ancestors well for millennia. The Vikings' biphasic sleep pattern represents not a primitive or less advanced approach to rest, but rather a more natural fit with human biology and environmental conditions. Their segmented sleep, adapted to the extreme seasonal variations of northern latitudes, likely provided more restorative rest than our modern expectation of 8 consecutive hours, a pattern that often leads to sleep anxiety and insomnia when it can't be achieved. Perhaps no factor contributed more significantly to the quality of Viking sleep than their relationship with darkness. This relationship is fundamentally different from our modern experience in an age before artificial lighting transformed everything. Human sleep patterns among the Norse people reflected their close connection to natural light cycles. This connection significantly influenced their sleep quality. The darkness in the north, where Viking settlements were mainly located in Scandinavia, along with expansions into Iceland, Greenland, and parts of the British Isles, resulted in dramatic seasonal changes in daylight. In winter, darkness prevailed, with some northern regions getting only a few hours of faint daylight. In summer, the situation flipped. The famous midnight sun offered nearly constant light in the northernmost settlements. Archaeological evidence from Viking homes shows how they adjusted to these extreme conditions. Long houses and smaller dwellings generally had few, if any, windows. The existing windows were small and could be covered with thin materials like animal membrane or oiled cloth. They could also be blocked with shutters. The central hearth provided the main source of light and heat, and its fire would be kept low during sleeping hours. This created a profound darkness during sleep time, a level of darkness that most modern people rarely experience, even on clear, moonlit nights. The interiors of Viking homes would have been dark enough to promote optimal sleep. As recognized by modern sleep researchers, modern science has identified darkness as critical for good sleep. Darkness stimulates the production of melatonin, the hormone that regulates sleep-wake cycles. When there isn't enough darkness, melatonin production declines, leading to difficulties falling asleep and decreased sleep quality, with possible long-term health effects. The Vikings, living without artificial light, would have had melatonin levels that closely matched the natural patterns of sunset and sunrise in winter. This meant higher melatonin levels for long stretches, creating perfect conditions for deep, restorative sleep. Consider Leif, a fisherman living near Bergen on the Norwegian coast. Archaeological findings in similar coastal areas suggest that his winter sleep environment was nearly completely dark from mid-afternoon until late morning, with only the faint glow of coals in the hearth for light. His pineal gland would have produced melatonin optimally for 12 to 16 hours daily during winter. A study in the Journal of Sleep Research found that when modern subjects were exposed to natural light patterns without artificial lighting for just 1 week, their sleep patterns aligned quickly with sunset and sunrise, and their melatonin production increased by 30%. The Vikings lived in such conditions their entire lives, likely enjoying consistently optimal melatonin production. The Vikings did have some forms of artificial light, using fires, oil lamps, and candles made from tallow or beeswax. However, these light sources were fundamentally different from modern lighting, allowing them to maintain good sleep quality. First, their light primarily came from the yellow and red spectrum, unlike the blue spectrum light that significantly inhibits melatonin production. Modern research shows that exposure to blue light from LEDs and screens in the evening can push back melatonin production by up to 3 hours. The warm light from Viking fires and candles would have had little effect on their circadian rhythms. Second, these light sources were quite dim. Experiments with reconstructed Viking oil lamps and candles indicate they produced about 5 to 20 lumens, while modern LED bulbs produce 800 to 1,500 lumens. This low level of light would not have considerably suppressed melatonin production. Third, artificial light was used sparingly due to the challenges of producing it. Candles and oil for lamps were relatively costly in terms of labor and materials. The sagas mention careful use of lighting resources, indicating that artificial light was used thoughtfully, not wastefully. The HVAML conveys wisdom that could be seen as highlighting the importance of darkness for sleep. The wise guest has his ways when he comes to the feast, silent attention and thought. This suggests a value placed on quiet, dark environments for restoration. The extreme seasonal changes in daylight in northern latitudes posed unique challenges for sleep regulation. In winter, the abundance of darkness made it easier to get enough sleep. However, during the summer, extended daylight required cultural adjustments. Archaeological evidence indicates that Vikings used thick curtains or hangings to create artificial darkness for sleeping during summer. These were usually made of heavy wool to block the midnight sun. In some Icelandic homes, evidence shows sleeping areas built into the thickest parts of the turf walls, creating naturally dark sleeping spaces regardless of outside light conditions. The sagas mention specific sleeping arrangements in summer months. For example, in Eagle's saga, there are mentions of sleeping chambers arranged to reduce light exposure. This indicates a cultural understanding of the need for darkness to maintain sleep quality, even during bright summer days. When natural darkness was rare, the Vikings had a complex relationship with natural light cycles. They understood more than just the day-night cycle. Evidence shows they were very aware of lunar cycles and how these could affect sleep. The Old Norse calendar was mainly lunar. Many surviving artifacts demonstrate detailed tracking of lunar phases. Full moon nights, which offer much more light than moonless nights, are sometimes mentioned in the sagas in connection with trouble, sleeping, or increased activity. Snorri Sturluson in the Prose Edda refers to the moon's impact on natural cycles, indicating an understanding of how it influenced human rhythms. Modern research supports this, showing that lunar cycles can affect human sleep. Studies reveal that people tend to take longer to fall asleep and experience less deep sleep during full moons, even when they can't see the moon. The Vikings' awareness of these natural cycles likely led to changes in behavior. Archaeological evidence from various settlements suggests that certain activities were planned according to lunar phases, which may have included changes to sleep timing and duration. The sleep-friendly relationship with darkness that marked the Viking Age began to shift in the following centuries. Increased use of candles, better oil lamps, and later gas and electric lights gradually diminished the natural darkness that had supported human sleep for generations. By the Industrial Revolution, artificial light had significantly changed sleep patterns across much of Europe. The invention of the electric light bulb in the late 19th century sped up this change, making true darkness increasingly uncommon. Today, light pollution impacts over 80% of the world's population, meaning many people never experience the complete darkness that was typical for the Vikings. Constant exposure to artificial light, especially blue light in the evening, has been linked to widespread sleep disorders and related health issues. The Vikings' reliance on natural darkness, both out of necessity and cultural practices, likely contributed greatly to better sleep quality than most modern humans experience. Their sleeping environments, marked by deep darkness during the night, would have supported optimal melatonin production and natural circadian rhythms, creating ideal conditions for restorative sleep that many can only dream of today. One of the most notable differences between Viking sleep practices and modern customs is the communal nature of sleep during the Norse era. While today's Western culture values private bedrooms and individual sleeping arrangements, archaeological evidence and saga accounts show that Vikings often slept in shared spaces. This arrangement likely improved their physical security and emotional well-being. Excavations of Viking homes across Scandinavia, Iceland, and Norse settlements in Scotland and Ireland reveal common patterns in sleeping arrangements. A typical Viking longhouse had a central hearth with sleeping platforms or benches along the walls. These platforms, usually raised and built into the house, were shared sleeping areas rather than private rooms. At Stung, a well-preserved Viking-age farmstead in Iceland, archaeologists found clear evidence of communal sleeping. The main longhouse had raised platforms along both long walls that served as seating by day and sleeping areas at night. Similar setups have been discovered from York in England to Land's Ox Meadows in Newfoundland, suggesting this was a widespread practice in the Viking world. The sleeping platforms were usually made of wood and would have been topped with straw, wool, and furs for comfort. Evidence indicates that these platforms were not divided into individual spaces, but were continuous, with whole households sharing the same area. Based on archaeological findings and saga stories, we can reconstruct typical sleeping arrangements in Viking homes. The master of the house and his wife usually occupied the most favorable part of the sleeping platform, often the section closest to the hearth for warmth, and sometimes slightly elevated or separated by architectural features to indicate their status. Children, unmarried relatives, and servants would take other parts of the same platform based on status and practical needs. In larger households, there might have been sleeping platforms on both sides of the longhouse, with the family of the head on one side and lower status members on the other. Consider the household of Gunnar H. Munderson, a wealthy farmer from southern Iceland. Archaeological evidence indicates that his longhouse measured about 20 meters by 5.5 m, with sleeping platforms along both long walls. Gunnar, his wife Helgetta, and their youngest children would have slept in the most desirable area of the platform, while older children, relatives, and workers occupied other sections. On especially cold winter nights, the entire household, maybe 15 to 20 people, would have slept in the same space, their body heat warming the building. This communal sleeping arrangement provided significant security benefits. An age when physical safety couldn't be taken for granted meant that with multiple people sleeping in the same space, someone was likely to wake if danger threatened. The sagas include many accounts of households being alerted to danger by someone waking at night. This served as a natural security system embedded in their sleeping arrangements. In Ya's saga, when enemies approach Gunnar's farm at night with harmful intentions, they are detected because someone in the household hears them outside and raises the alarm. This pattern appears repeatedly in the sagas, showing how communal sleeping worked as an effective early warning system for travelers. Communal sleeping provided additional security. The Haramile advises travelers to stay alert, warning that a man should never sleep in a stranger's house, as many who seem harmless can prove to be harmful when night falls. The poem suggests that it is wise to sleep with one's weapons close by in communal situations. Travelers would be surrounded by others, reducing their vulnerability. Beyond the practical security benefits, modern sleep science indicates that communal sleep arrangements may have offered significant psychological advantages that improve sleep quality. Humans are naturally social, and feeling secure by sleeping near trusted individuals can greatly enhance sleep quality. Research published in the journal Sleep Health found that those who report stronger social connections tend to experience better sleep quality. The physical presence of trusted others during sleep seems to lower vigilance and anxiety, enabling deeper and more restorative sleep. For Viking children, sleeping alongside family members likely provided a sense of security important for healthy sleep development. Studies of traditional cultures practicing co-sleeping have shown that children in these arrangements often have fewer sleep disturbances and develop healthy sleep associations. The sagas occasionally mention the comfort that comes from communal sleeping. In Grida's saga, the main character, who often finds himself in isolation due to his outlaw status, specifically mentions missing the security of sleeping among household members. This suggests a cultural understanding of the psychological benefits of communal sleep. The communal nature of Viking sleeping arrangements raises questions about privacy, especially regarding intimacy between couples. Archaeological and literary evidence suggests several adaptations to address these concerns. Some excavated Viking homes show evidence of curtains or dividers that could create semi-private areas within the communal sleeping space. At the Copper Gate excavations in York, archaeologists found remnants of textile dividers that seemed to section off parts of sleeping platforms. The sagas sometimes mention closed beds or bed closets, which were box-like structures that provided privacy within the larger communal space. These were mainly used by the head of the household and his wife, serving as both a status symbol and a practical solution for privacy needs. Additionally, the biphasic sleep pattern mentioned earlier allowed natural opportunities for intimacy. During the midnight waking period, when some household members might engage in activities away from the sleeping area. While Viking sleep was fundamentally communal, archaeological evidence shows subtle status distinctions within sleeping arrangements. Higher status individuals typically occupied the coziest sections of sleeping platforms, usually closest to the central hearth. In some excavated longhouses, the head of the household's sleeping area featured slightly better construction, additional furs, or small architectural differences. At Borg in Lorton, Norway, archaeologists uncovered a large chieftain's longhouse with clear evidence of status differences in sleeping arrangements. The high-status sleeping area was elevated and showed remnants of higher quality bedding materials than other sections. These distinctions in communal sleeping arrangements reflect the hierarchical yet interconnected nature of Viking society, maintaining social order while preserving the security and psychological benefits of sleeping close to others. The intensity of communal sleeping likely varied by season in the Viking world. During harsh northern winters, practical concerns around warmth would have encouraged closer sleeping arrangements, with body heat being vital for survival. Archaeological evidence from several sites suggests that winter dwellings were often smaller and better insulated than summer structures, leading to more intimate sleeping conditions in cold months. In contrast, during summer, with milder temperatures, sleeping arrangements may have been more spread out, with some household members possibly sleeping in outbuildings or even outdoors. This seasonal variation would have created a rhythm of closeness and distance throughout the year, potentially fostering social cohesion while avoiding conflicts that might arise from constant close proximity. The communal sleeping arrangements of the Viking Age began to shift in the centuries that followed with the rise of Christianity and increased influence from continental European practices. By the late medieval period, wealthy Scandinavian homes began to have more separate living spaces. They featured individual sleeping chambers, particularly for those of high status. This trend continued and sped up through the Renaissance and into modern times. Eventually, it led to our current focus on private bedrooms. The shift from communal to private sleeping arrangements marks one of the most important yet least discussed changes in human sleep behavior over the last 1,000 years. Viking communal sleep practices evolved over many years to improve security and psychological well-being. These were gradually replaced by sleeping setups that prioritize privacy and personal space, often at the cost of the social bonds that defined sleep for most of human history. Evidence indicates that communal sleeping among Vikings likely improved sleep quality. By sharing a sleeping space with trusted people, they experienced increased security and psychological comfort, which modern sleep science now recognizes as important for deep restorative sleep. Their communal sleeping arrangements were not a basic need to be overcome. Instead, they were a smart adaptation that supported optimal rest in their context. The sleeping environment in the Viking Age was very different from today's modern bedrooms. However, archaeological evidence suggests that Norse sleeping setups might have actually provided better ergonomic support and healthier conditions than many current mattresses. Viking beds were mainly made from natural materials sourced locally, creating a sleeping surface that modern sleep science increasingly sees as good for proper spinal alignment and temperature control. Excavations throughout the Viking world show consistent building patterns for sleeping surfaces. Typically, the foundations were raised wooden platforms built along the walls of longhouses. These platforms, made of split logs or planks, were generally 40 to 60 centimeters high and 1.5 to 2 meters wide. This size allowed them to function as seating during the day and sleeping areas at night. At the Fireit settlement in Denmark, archaeologists found well-preserved sleeping platforms that displayed careful construction. The wooden base was slightly sloped toward the wall, creating a small incline that would have elevated sleepers' heads slightly above their feet. Modern sleep research suggests that this setup can enhance circulation and reduce acid reflux during sleep. Similar platforms have been discovered at Viking sites from Dublin to the Faroe Islands, indicating this feature was common across Norse culture. These wooden platforms provided a stable foundation that prevented sleepers from lying directly on the often damp ground, an important factor in the humid northern climate. On these platforms, Vikings created layered bedding using entirely natural materials. Archaeological evidence, along with references in sagas, suggests a typical arrangement of layers that offered comfort and insulation. The base layer was usually made of locally harvested straw or hay. At several archaeological sites, including settlements in Iceland and Greenland, preserved remnants of these straw mattresses have been found. Analysis shows that the straw was generally replaced seasonally and chosen for its softness, with certain grass types being preferred. While straw may seem primitive compared to modern mattresses, it has several advantages as a sleeping surface. It offers natural spring and flexibility, conforming slightly to the body while still providing support. Research suggests that moderately firm, responsive surfaces like this may be optimal for spinal alignment during sleep. Additionally, straw allows for air circulation, preventing heat buildup that can happen with solid mattresses. This breathability would have helped maintain a comfortable sleeping temperature, which sleep scientists now see as essential for quality rest. The Norse practice of regularly replacing the straw would have also reduced dust, mites, and allergens that can accumulate in modern mattresses. Above the straw layer, archaeological evidence indicates that layers of woolen materials were typically added. Fragments found at Viking burial sites and settlements show that coarse woolen blankets were common even in modest households. Experimental archaeology, where researchers recreate and use replicas of Viking bedding, has demonstrated that these woolen layers provided excellent insulation. Wool retains its insulating properties even when damp, which is vital in the humid Norse climate. Additionally, wool's natural lanolin content makes it somewhat water-resistant and inhibits bacterial growth. contributing to a healthier sleeping environment. Some sagas mention arbrata coverings made of wadmal, a rough woolen cloth that was a key part of Viking textile production. These coverings would have been placed over the straw layer to add comfort and prevent the straw from poking through. For those who could afford it, animal furs and skins formed the top layer of Viking bedding. Archaeological evidence from higher status burials and settlements shows the use of these materials.